Yeah, yeah. 10 years old with a ball at his feet. Dream so big, ain't nothing really.
But first off, I want to share something with you. So this is the global premiere of a song that has never ever been heard before by the world. So this song was created by my son. He's 10 years old, and he found out about this tool from his class called Suno, where you can create a prompt, and then the tool will create a song for you. So the prompt's on the screen, but essentially saying, hey, I'm a 10-year-old boy, I'm into soccer, I'm into robotics, and I'm into piano. Create a song for me in the style of hip-hop rap. I guess that's what him and his friends are really into right now, with a male voice. And that's what this tool did. So it's just kind of blowing my mind where we are in the state of technology. So that's a little bit of the introduction of myself. My name is Tim Chan. A few things I've done in my life include becoming an accountant, which then enabled me to work in oil and gas here in Calgary for about 15 years. And then a couple years ago, I left Suncor and was wondering what I should do when I grew up. And one of the options that opened up for me was to teach. And so I connected with someone here at the University of Calgary, particularly in the Hastings School of Business. And they said, well, do you want to come in and teach IT? And I said, well, wait a second, I'm an accountant. I don't have a computer science background. I don't know if I'm qualified to teach IT. But Dr. Patterson there said, no, if you've been working in industry for more than 10 years, you're using business technology tools all the time. And so that's what I do. So I'm a sessional instructor with Hastings School of Business, and I teach at the undergrad and graduate level, teaching students business technology management, where I can then talk about cool tools like what my son just used to create a song, and really talk about how it is that information technology, business technology can create value for businesses. Okay, so what does that have to do with today? Well, you'll see now how actually a lot of it, and including in my own career, things have always come full circle. So today, really delighted to be here and to just share a little bit about data analytics in oil and gas. And you may be along in your academic career wondering, well, how it is can I take what it is I'm learning in this class and have that then be able to open up opportunities for me? And particularly given that we live in Calgary, it's still a very much energy-driven city. So there's still a lot of oil and gas companies, large oil and gas companies. You're going to hear from my friend Alonzo, who works at one of those. So there are still lots of opportunities. So I think being able to tie what you're learning in this class to future potential opportunities is quite important. Okay, so first you may need to know a little bit about oil and gas. Why is it that there's such a still thriving, I guess, sector or industry that's located here in Calgary? Well, I guess if we think back not too far ago, Canada has become quite a source of this energy, particularly in oil and gas. And one of the largest places in the world where you can find that type of resource is right here, and particularly in Western Canada. So most of Canada's oil is actually located here in what is known as the Western Canadian Sedimentary Basin. Okay, so for us here being in Calgary, on the traditional Treaty 7 territories, where we're meeting today to be able to share knowledge with one another. Nations and communities have known about this for quite a long time. But it wasn't until about 1715 that someone actually discovered that it was this kind of black stuff that was floating along in the river. And they had discovered that this black material smelled a lot like coal and had actually a lot of energy potential in it. And that's really how this whole industry started. So there's three main geographical regions in this Western Canadian area that has a lot of these reserves of oil and gas. That would be your Peace River, your Cold Lake, and the Athabasca region, which is where the city of Fort McMurray is. So hence that's why we often hear a lot of the relationship between the city of Fort McMurray and a lot of the oil and gas industry. So here in Canada, particularly in this sedentary basin, there's roughly 1.8, this is rounded up, okay, I'm going to count, 2 trillion, so that's with a T, 2 trillion barrels of oil that's located in our space here. Now, not all of it is, you're able to get to it economically, so we'll say about 10% of that. But 10% of that is still 160 billion barrels of oil that is available underneath where we're standing. So based on that, Canada is actually the 4th largest nation with these type of energy reserves, just behind Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. Okay, so there's a lot of this natural resource that's here. You're probably starting to hear some of that coming through in the rhetoric, the geopolitical rhetoric that we've been hearing lately about why it is that Canada is such an important energy partner. So at this point, and I'd say I'll err on the side of conservative, where roughly there's maybe 4 million barrels of oil that get produced on a daily basis. That's kind of the most optimum state. Typically it's a little bit less than that, but we'll call it 4 million barrels that get produced every single day. Roughly half of that gets done through what's called in situ, okay, and the other half is done through, I guess, conventional surface extraction. Alonzo will maybe dive a little bit more into kind of like the differences of those two. But in situ is actually one of those ways where essentially you're just sticking a straw into the ground, you're injecting heat or solvent, and then all of a sudden what comes back up is this glorious bitumen. Okay? So data analytics has actually always been around in oil and gas ever since it was first discovered. Back in 1715, someone who worked for Hudson Bay, and I think they're in the news recently as well too. I think they're having a little bit of a challenge, but someone from Hudson Bay was just walking around and had noticed that this gum and pitch, so this black material, was existing in quite a lot of abundance in this particular region. So this person wrote it down. Okay, well there you go. That's your very first data point in oil and gas. And you probably appreciate data can be both quantitative in nature, it can be qualitative in nature, it can be someone just writing down, hey, there's a lot of this black stuff that is located in this area here. It can be structured, so someone writing a bunch of numbers into a notepad. It can also be unstructured as well, which is why I am recording today, because later on I'll talk about how it is that you may consider how it is that you can start creating for yourself a bit of a brand, because that's going to be quite important as you're thinking about how it is that you're going to get a job in oil and gas. So in roughly 2016, we'll call it maybe 2016 to 2018, all of a sudden we started hearing about this idea of big data. This idea that, ooh, all of a sudden if I just looked, I can see that these companies that have been around for a while have been gathering all of this data, the quantitative, the qualitative data, the structured, the unstructured data. Wow, we've got all this data and we might be able to do something with it. And so there were a few things that were happening at that time that all of a sudden made data, big data analytics, a very popular topic. Well, the ability to store all this data was becoming less cost prohibitive, so cheaper storage of data, but also the ability to process all of this data, so processing power was becoming much more accessible and more prevalent. There were also advances in machine learning and deep learning, so a lot of more techniques were being developed in how it is that you can go into all this data, apply some mathematical approaches, statistical approaches, and all of a sudden you had these amazing insights and predictions. And there was also a lot of pressure from the capital markets as well too, because a lot of these oil and gas companies, well, they're publicly traded, and shareholders will be shareholders, and they're always going to be demanding more and more return on the investment that they have put into your company. So short of these companies extracting more of this oil out of the ground, they had to start thinking about creative ways of how they might create more value for their shareholders. And data analytics tended to be kind of a solution for that. So we started hearing a lot about this term, data is the new oil. Okay, so even though we had trillions of barrels in the ground, but yet these companies were still looking for ways to generate more value. And so data became the new oil. Okay, so I'm just going to wrap up with a few thoughts about current trends, as well as emerging opportunities, because that might be something that you're all curious about as you're thinking about what happens after your academic experience here. And then just a few call to actions, things that you can think about doing right away that will just enable you to be successful in a career in data and analytics. I ripped off this chart from Alonzo's presentation. But you do hear, especially today, the use of AI is thrown around and it talks about anything, right? Anything. Companies will put AI into their names because they know that that will attract attention. Or you can AI-ify something, and then all of a sudden it gets some more traction. But Alonso did a great job describing what this is. So you start off with a broader domain of artificial intelligence, which is really, can you make a machine behave as if it were human? Okay? And then a subset of that would then be machine learning. So using math and stats, and you start doing pattern recognition, because you know that using classification, linear regression, all these things are tools that will help you to predict something that could happen. So with a certain degree of confidence, probability. Alonso mentioned about that in his presentation. And then of course a subset of machine learning is then the deep learning. And this is now where, well, if the brain has all these neurons that are connected together and information and processing can happen, I wonder if we can make a machine behave as if it were a human brain. So this is kind of where the ideas of neural networks started to become quite popular. There's been quite a lot of work that has been done on the neural network side of artificial intelligence. And then November 22 happened, right? November 2022, OpenAI introduced this tool called ChatGPT. Well, actually ChatGPT was around for a while, but I think the version that it introduced in November of 2022 was quite impressive. And so that has what has captured a lot of our imagination now up to this point about what artificial intelligence is, when really it's just a very small subset of artificial intelligence. So where might there be some emerging opportunities? So if you know about the history of oil and gas in this province and in this country, if you know about the ability that once you have acquired all of these superpowers in this class, that you can start deriving insights from the data, from the big data. Alonso said it, hey, tell us something that we don't know. Then you can start thinking about where there might be some opportunities that you can take these skills to an organization to create value for them. Or you might even start up your own company as well too. In a lot of larger organizations, there's typically two career paths that you can consider. There is a technical specialist path, which just means, hey, you're really good at what you do, and they will hire you to do what that is, and you will do that forever and ever. So you may decide, okay, well, with all that's happening in generative AI, we've heard about this prompt engineering. Okay, everybody's going to be a prompt engineer. The engineers have a problem with that because that's not really engineering. But that's aside. But 2 weeks ago, all of a sudden, when prompt engineering was the most sought after Google search term, it has now been overtaken by something called vibe coding. Okay, so a lot of these frontier models, so not only just ChatGPT, but you'll hear from Anthropic, you'll hear from DeepSeek, they all have these reasoning models that are coming out now. And a lot of these reasoning models are good at writing code. So now you don't actually need to be all that good at coding, and this is not to take away from what Alonso said about knowing SQL and knowing about Python, but a lot of these tools now, you can prompt it, as you would to prompt it to create a cute puppy dog picture to help you create the code that you need in order to run a lot of these functions. So this ability to vibe code is now something, I have no idea what it really means, but it is actually now a more popular search term than prompt engineering is. Okay, so that's one way to think about it. You can be a technical specialist. The other is people leadership. So that often is another very common way that you can build and develop a career in one of these organizations. So in this case, you just pick a domain. It could be the domain of computer science. It could be in the domain of geomatics engineering. Or in my case, it could be in the domain of internal audit accounting. Whatever it is, just choose something that you are good at. That becomes your domain. Then, on top of that, you want to be good at leading people. Because we're still in a state right now where a lot of organizations really depend on how it is that they organize all of their human capital, and they will always need people that are good at leading people. That may be one of the reasons why Pasadena School of Business is a popular institution. They know that if you want to train people to be good people leaders, here is a way of doing that. So if you combine those two together, you will have a much better shot at finding yourself in a role in an organization that values people people leadership pathways. Now, I say that, and I know that we are in March of 2025, that's how things are now. I don't have a crystal ball, I'm not a very good gambler, but I might be able to say that in the very near future, leadership within an organization is going to look a little bit different. Where traditionally it's been about leading human capital, I think very shortly with where agentic AI is going, that leaders within an organization are not only managing a group of human workers, but they will also have to manage teams of AI agents as well too. Now what does that look like? I don't know, because Haskell doesn't have an organizational behavior and human resources and agentic AI management program. That doesn't exist yet. But part of what you may want to consider is what could happen in the future, and it could be the very near future, given where there's so much talk about agentic AI right now. Okay, so your call to action. So you want to stay on top of all of the disruption that's happening. I believe that you are in the part of academia that is on the forefront of knowing where all of these frontier models are going, but also the underlying foundation of that, which is the data. Because if you think about it, all of these generative AI algorithms, they all rely on data. And as Alonso has pointed out, you need to have good data in order for your models, be it machine learning models, your deep learning neural networks, it all depends on if you are familiar with your data. So the need for data science and those that are comfortable in using those techniques is probably more important than ever. So understanding where some of these frontier models are, what's happening, paying attention to some of the geopolitical impacts, and I'm not talking about tariff and trade wars, but the attempt by nations to try to do things to try to maintain a competitive advantage, such as putting an embargo on high-powered processing chips, thinking that, oh, if you control all of the high-powered and latest GPUs, that would give your nation a competitive advantage in the AI race. Well, I think we have just seen in the last 2 months with so many, I don't know who can keep up with all of the models that are coming out of China right now. But they are demonstrating that you can achieve a lot of the same evaluation outcomes that using, well, they hadn't had access to a lot of these high-powered NVIDIA chips, right? But yet they're still able to produce these outcomes. So that's what I mean by kind of keeping an eye on some of the geopolitical things that are happening, because that will have an impact on the type of data and the type of processing that you have access to. I'm really thankful and appreciative of Alonso's second use case, because I think this debate or this discourse around closed source versus open source will be an ongoing way that will determine exactly how AI is going to play out. Maybe one of the reasons why a lot of these models coming out of China are gaining a lot of traction is because they're all open source. Whereas if you think of all of the frontier models that are coming out from the West, they're all closed down. Maybe, you might say Meta has an open source model. But generally speaking, the approach from the West has been more to be closed source. Okay, so at a high level, I think if you stay in touch with all of that in the development, you'll be ahead of the curve. But how can you actually put some of all of these concepts into practice? Are there things that you can do now, even locally, that allow you to put that into practice? Well, thankfully there are. There are these communities of practices. In fact, back in 2018, I helped to co-found a data science nonprofit, the mission of which is to try to provide everyone with the opportunity to be upskilled in data literacy. And I'm not only the Hair Club president, but I'm also a Hair Club member, because as an accountant, I was thinking, well, how could I use data literacy to enhance the way that I was doing my work? Because I was a little bit worried that with all this talk about big data that, well, in case you didn't know, but accounting is one of those jobs that can be automated very quickly. So out of sheer terror and just wanting to survive, I got together with a few other friends and we started up this community of practice called Untapped Energy. And so we meet on a monthly basis where we invite amazing presenters like Alonso who will come and share a little bit about how they're using data techniques, data practices, and data tools to try to solve some complex problems. It's a great way of meeting other data practitioners that are in this space, and it's also a great way of practicing data, because not only do we have meetups and micro-learning courses, but we do datathons. We had our first datathon in 2018. So over the course of 2 days, or 3 days, I guess it was a weekend, over 100 people from all across Calgary got together, and we were using data related to oil and gas. Alonzo already mentioned before, there's a lot of open data that's out there, a lot that are provided by government agencies. And so we thought, okay, well, why don't we just see what's in the data? Let's see if we can see some interesting insights, things that we didn't know before. And so it represented a way for all data practitioners, it didn't really matter how experienced you were, to be able to come together and just learn a little bit about what data is, certain techniques that you can use, and how it is to be able to tell then a very interesting story at the end of it. Because it's not only the ability to find these insights, but a big part of what you need to do is be able to do the data storytelling. So why does it matter? So when you see those pictures of the prairie potholes, why does that matter when it comes to conservation? When you have a model that can tell you with a certain degree of certainty where all your well pads are, why is that important for a large oil and gas company? Okay. So that takes us to the end of this particular part of the presentation. I think I'm a little bit more self-promoting than Alonzo is, but I'm absolutely positive that you can connect with them as well too. I've just left up some details about myself as well as how to connect with me on LinkedIn. So yeah, both Alonzo and I, we want to thank you for listening to a little bit of our story, but we're also quite happy to hang around and be able to help answer some questions, which I know you've already put as well in that Google Sheet. So thanks very much, everyone.
His garage, his chance. Code flow smoother than his dribble game. Future engineer putting stars to shame. Soccer circuits and piano keys. Young